The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me awake from a dreamless sleep. The caller ID made my heart freeze in my chest. Marcus. My brother. The same brother who had looked me in the eyes 3 years ago and told me I wasn't his family anymore. The same brother who had slammed the door in my face when I needed him most. 3 years of silence, and now he was calling in the middle of the night. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the answer button, knowing whatever reason he had for breaking his vow of never speaking to me again couldn't be good. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia Reyes, though everyone has called me Liv since I was old enough to talk. I've always been what people politely call the responsible one. The peacemaker. The one who would rather swallow her pride than cause a scene. Growing up in our small town outside of Portland, I was the daughter who color-coded her school notes, who started saving for college at 14 by working weekends at the local bookstore, who graduated with honors while juggling volunteer work and family obligations. Marcus was different. 2 years older than me, he was magnetic, charming, and completely undisciplined. He coasted through school on natural intelligence and charm, his bedroom a perpetual disaster zone, his homework completed minutes before class if at all. While I meticulously planned my future, Marcus lived entirely in the moment, collecting friends and admirers with effortless charisma. Our parents adored him. Dad, a high school football coach with more trophies than patience, saw in Marcus the son he'd always wanted, athletic, popular, and fearless. Mom, a kindergarten teacher with a soft spot for troubled kids, endlessly excused his behavior as just Marcus being Marcus. When he crashed the car they'd given him for his 16th birthday, they bought him another. When he failed 3 classes his senior year, they hired tutors to help him graduate. Meanwhile, I earned academic scholarships, worked part-time throughout college, and graduated with a nursing degree and minimal student loans. I found my calling in the pediatric oncology ward at Providence Medical Center, where the work was emotionally brutal but deeply fulfilling. The children facing the worst circumstances with unwavering courage inspired me daily, teaching me more about resilience than any textbook ever could. Our family dynamics remained relatively stable until the summer after I turned 25. That June, our grandmother Eleanor passed away after a long battle with lung cancer. Grandma Ellie had been my touchstone, the one person who seemed to truly see me beyond the responsible one label. She was fierce, independent, and surprisingly progressive for a woman of her generation. We would spend hours in her garden, talking about everything from politics to my secret dream of someday opening a wellness center for pediatric cancer survivors. The loss hit me hard, but what came after her funeral shattered our family in ways I couldn't have imagined. Grandma Ellie had left specific instructions in her will. The bulk of her modest estate was divided equally between Marcus and me, but she had made one special allocation: her 3-bedroom craftsman house on Willow Street would go to me alone. To Olivia, the will read, who has always understood the value of having roots and building something meaningful. The house has been in our family for 3 generations. I trust you to honor its history while creating your own future within its walls. The reading of the will in the attorney's office was followed by a silence so complete you could hear the antique clock ticking on the wall. I sat frozen, unable to look at Marcus or my parents. The house was the most valuable part of Grandma's estate, not just financially, but emotionally. It was where we'd spent countless holidays, where family photos covered every surface, where the height chart in the kitchen doorway had marked our growth since we were toddlers. There must be some mistake, Mom said finally, her voice unnaturally high. Eleanor wouldn't have excluded Marcus from the house. The attorney, a woman in her 60s who had been Grandma's friend for decades, shook her head. Eleanor was very clear about her wishes. She revised this will just 6 months ago, with full mental capacity. The house goes to Olivia. The drive home was excruciating. Dad gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, while Mom stared out the window, occasionally wiping away tears. Marcus sat beside me in the back seat, radiating fury, his jaw clenched so hard I thought he might crack a tooth. "You can have it," I whispered to him, desperate to defuse the tension. "We can work something out. I don't need the house." He turned to look at me then, his eyes cold in a way I'd never seen before. "Don't pretend you didn't know. Don't pretend you didn't manipulate her into this." "What?" "Marcus, I had no idea." "Save it," he cut me off. "You always were her favorite. Always the perfect granddaughter with your gardening and your little heart-to-heart talks. What did you tell her about me, huh? What lies did you feed her?" His accusation left me speechless. Grandma Ellie and I had been close, yes, but I had never said an unkind word about Marcus to her. If anything, I had often defended him when she expressed concern about his directionless lifestyle. The confrontation at home was even worse. In the living room where we had once opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays, my family turned into strangers. "You need to make this right, Olivia," Dad said, pacing across the carpet. "The house should belong to both of you. It's what your grandmother would have wanted if she'd been thinking clearly." "She was thinking clearly," I protested. "You heard the attorney. Grandma revised her will just 6 months ago." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When she was on heavy medication, Mom countered. She wasn't herself. The implication that Grandma Ellie had been mentally compromised felt like a betrayal. I had visited her weekly during those final months. We had talked about books, politics, and yes, sometimes my dreams for the future. But I had never once brought up her will or suggested what she should do with her property. "I didn't ask for the house," I said quietly. "But Grandma made her choice, and we should respect it." Marcus laughed then, a harsh sound without humor. "Always so self-righteous. Always the good daughter, the perfect granddaughter. Tell me, Liv, did you practice your shocked face in the mirror before the will reading? Or did that come naturally, too?" "That's enough," Dad said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. He wasn't defending me, he was just trying to keep the peace. "No, it's not enough," Marcus continued, his voice rising. "She's been playing all of you for years, and you've never seen it. Little Miss Perfect with her scholarships and her noble nursing career. Meanwhile, she's been calculating every move, including how to steal Grandma's house." "I didn't steal anything," I finally shouted, my composure cracking. "Grandma made her choice. I'm sorry if you're hurt, but this isn't my fault." Marcus stood up then, towering over me. "You know what? Keep the damn house. Keep everything. But understand this, you're not my sister anymore. As far as I'm concerned, you're not family." The words hit me like a physical blow. Throughout our childhood, despite our differences, Marcus had been my protector, my ally against the world. When neighborhood kids teased me about my braces, he'd threatened to pulverize them. When my first boyfriend broke my heart at 16, Marcus had stayed up all night with me, watching terrible movies and making ice cream sundaes until I laughed again. "You don't mean that," I whispered. "Watch me," he replied, then walked out, slamming the door behind him. I looked to my parents, expecting them to intervene, to call him back, to tell him family doesn't walk away from family. Instead, Mom was crying silently, and Dad was staring at me with disappointment etched in every line of his face. "I hope you're satisfied," he said quietly. "Was a house worth tearing this family apart?" In that moment, I realized I was alone. My family had collectively decided that I was the villain in this story, that I had somehow engineered Grandma's decision to leave me her house. The unfairness of it burned like acid in my throat. "I didn't do anything wrong," I said, standing up straighter. "Grandma made her choice, and I won't apologize for it." I left that night, driving back to my small apartment in Portland through a blur of tears. Over the next few weeks, I tried repeatedly to reach out to Marcus, leaving voicemails and text messages that went unanswered. My parents maintained cool, formal contact, their disappointment evident in every stilted conversation. 3 months after the will reading, I moved into Grandma Ellie's house. It felt both like coming home and entering a stranger's space. The familiar scent of her lavender sachets still lingered in the closets, but the silence where her laughter should have been felt wrong. I kept most of her furniture, donated some of her clothes to charity, and carefully packed away family photos and mementos in the hope that someday Marcus might want them. My parents visited exactly once, standing awkwardly in the living room. Like unwelcome guests, declining my offer of coffee or tea. "We're worried about Marcus," Mom said, cutting to the chase. "He's not doing well with all of this." "I've tried to talk to him," I replied. "He won't answer my calls." "He feels betrayed," Dad added. "He and Eleanor had a special bond too, you know." The implication that I had somehow forgotten or dismissed Marcus's relationship with our grandmother stung. "I know they did. That's why I don't understand why she made this decision." Mom sighed heavily. "We thought maybe you could sell the house and split the money with him. It would go a long way toward healing this rift." I stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You want me to sell Grandma's house? The house that's been in our family for 3 generations? The house she specifically wanted me to have? We want our family back together," Dad said firmly. "Sometimes that requires sacrifice. And it's always me who needs to sacrifice, isn't it?" I asked quietly. "Never, Marcus." They left shortly after, their disappointment palpable. I stood in the doorway watching their car pull away, feeling the gulf between us widen with every passing second. That night, I sat in Grandma Ellie's garden, my garden now, and tried to make sense of everything. The moonlight silvered the roses she had tended so carefully, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called mournfully. I pulled her old woolen cardigan tighter around my shoulders and finally allowed myself to cry properly for the first time since her death. What should I do, Grandma? I whispered to the stars. Why did you put me in this position? I half expected to feel her presence, to receive some mystical sign or sudden clarity. Instead, there was only the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant sound of traffic. But sitting there in the garden she had loved, surrounded by plants she had nurtured, I began to understand. Grandma Ellie hadn't left me the house to cause a family rift or to punish Marcus. She had recognized something in me that even I hadn't fully acknowledged, a deep-seated desire to create a space of healing. My casual mentions of someday wanting to help pediatric cancer survivors hadn't been just idle dreams. They had been the whispers of my true calling. The next morning, I called a contractor to discuss converting the detached garage into a small wellness studio. 6 months later, I opened the doors to Willow Wellness, offering free weekend programs for children recovering from cancer and their families. I continued my hospital work during the week, but my weekends were devoted to providing yoga, art therapy, and nutritional guidance to kids who had fought the same battles as my hospital patients. The work was exhausting but deeply fulfilling. Each child who found momentary peace in the garden or who created art that expressed their complex feelings about survivorship affirmed that Grandma Ellie had been right. This house had a purpose, and somehow, she had seen that I was the one to fulfill it. My parents gradually thawed as they saw what I was building, occasionally dropping off homemade meals or gardening supplies. They never explicitly apologized for doubting me, but their actions spoke of a growing acceptance. Marcus, however, remained completely absent from my life. I heard about him only through my parents' careful mentions. He had moved to Seattle, was working for a tech company, had a serious girlfriend. Life settled into a new normal. I dated occasionally but found most men couldn't understand my devotion to my young cancer survivors. My closest relationships were with my colleagues at the hospital and the parents of the children who came to Willow Wellness. I missed Marcus with an ache that never quite subsided, but I had created a meaningful life that honored Grandma Ellie's legacy. And then, 3 years after he had walked out of my life, Marcus called at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I answered on the fourth ring, my heart pounding. Marcus? Liv, his voice sounded strange, hoarse and unfamiliar. I need to see you. It's the middle of the night, I said, still struggling to process that he was actually speaking to me after 3 years of silence. Tomorrow then. Can I come to the house? He emphasized the house in a way that suggested it still wasn't quite mine in his mind. Of course, I replied, too quickly. Anytime. Are you okay? There was a long pause before he answered. No. But I'll explain tomorrow. He hung up before I could ask anything else, leaving me wide awake and anxious. Whatever had prompted Marcus to break 3 years of silence, it couldn't be good. I spent the next day in a haze of nervous anticipation, rescheduling my hospital shift and canceling the afternoon wellness program. I cleaned the house manically, as if dusting bookshelves could somehow prepare me for whatever storm was coming. By the time the doorbell rang at 4:30 p.m., I had changed my outfit 3 times and rehearsed a dozen different opening lines. Nothing could have prepared me for the man who stood on Grandma Ellie's porch. Marcus had always been robust and athletic, with our father's broad shoulders and easy physical confidence. The person before me was a shadow, thin to the point of gauntness, with dark circles under his eyes and a yellowish tint to his skin. He looked a decade older than his 30 years. Marcus, I breathed, instinctively reaching for him before catching myself. Come in. He stepped past me into the foyer, his eyes moving around the space. You've kept it mostly the same, he observed. Yes. It felt right that way. I led him to the living room, noting how his gaze lingered on the family photos I had kept displayed despite everything. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Water? Water would be good. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter for support, trying to process the shock of his appearance. Whatever was happening, it was serious. When I returned with 2 glasses of water, he was standing by the window overlooking the garden, where a group of young cancer survivors had painted bright ceramic pots the previous weekend. Mom mentioned what you're doing here, he said, taking the water without meeting my eyes. With the kids. Willow Wellness, I nodded. It's small, but it's making a difference. He nodded slowly, then finally turned to face me. I'm sick. Liv, the words hung in the air between us, and suddenly his appearance made terrible sense. The weight loss, the jaundice, the exhaustion evident in every movement. How sick? I asked, medical training kicking in even as my heart constricted. With fear. End-stage renal disease. My kidneys are failing. He delivered the news flatly, as if reading from a weather report. I've been on dialysis for 6 months, but it's not a long-term solution. I need a transplant. I sank onto the sofa, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He gave a bitter laugh. How could you? I made sure you had no idea what was happening in my life. What happened? Kidney disease doesn't usually just appear out of nowhere. He sat down across from me, his movements careful and measured. Remember that summer in high school when I had that bad strep infection? Apparently, it caused something called post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Most people recover completely, but in some cases, it causes permanent damage. I've had declining kidney function for years, but it accelerated dramatically last year. My mind raced through what I knew about kidney disease from my medical training. Strep throat leading to kidney damage wasn't common, but it happened. And yes, sometimes the decline could be gradual for years before suddenly accelerating. Have they put you on the transplant list? I asked. I've been on it for 4 months. But the waiting list for a deceased donor is years long. He paused, staring down at his hands. They've suggested looking for a living donor. And there it was. The real reason for his middle-of-the-night phone call. The reason he had broken 3 years of silence and declared I wasn't family anymore. You need a kidney, I said softly. And you're here to ask if I'll get tested as a potential donor. He finally looked directly at me, his eyes, so like our father's, filled with a complex mixture of desperation, shame, and something that might have been hope. Yes, he said simply. I need a kidney. And siblings are often the best match. The irony was almost too perfect. The brother who had declared I wasn't family now needed the most intimate form of family support possible, a piece of my physical body to save his life. Does Mom know you're here? I asked, buying time as emotions churned inside me. He nodded. They both do. They wanted to come with me, but I told them this was between you and me. When you said I wasn't family anymore, I said carefully, did you mean it? Marcus flinched as if I'd slapped him. Liv, no, I need to know. When you walked out 3 years ago and told me I wasn't your sister anymore, was that just anger talking, or did you mean it? Because now you're sitting in Grandma's living room, my living room, asking me for a kidney. I was hurt and angry, he said after a long moment. I felt like you had taken something that should have been partly mine. Something that connected me to Grandma too. I offered to work something out, I reminded him. You walked away. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that made my heart ache with recognition. I was wrong. About a lot of things. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where my young cancer survivors found moments of peace. Children who faced death with courage I could barely comprehend. Children who would give anything for the chance that Marcus now had, the possibility of a cure, of a normal lifespan. You need to understand something, I said finally, turning back to face him. If I get tested, if I turn out to be a match, if I decide to donate, it won't be because you've suddenly decided I'm family again now that you need something from me. It will be because despite everything, I never stopped considering you. My brother. Marcus's eyes filled with tears, the first time I had seen him cry since we were children. I don't deserve your help, he said hoarsely. I know that. But I don't want to die, Liv. I'm 30 years old, and I'm not ready to die. The raw vulnerability in his voice broke something open inside me. This was Marcus, my childhood protector, my first friend, the brother who had stayed up all night to comfort me over a broken heart. He had hurt me deeply, yes. But he was still my brother. I'll get tested, I said quietly. I can't promise anything beyond that right now. But I'll get tested. He nodded, unable to speak, tears now flowing freely down his gaunt face. We sat in silence as the afternoon light faded, the weight of 3 years of estrangement and the uncertainty of the future hanging between us. That night, after Marcus left with a promise to text me the contact information for his transplant coordinator, I returned to Grandma Ellie's garden. The same garden where I had sought guidance 3 years earlier. Did you see this coming somehow, Grandma? I whispered to the night air. Is this why you left me the house? So I would have something Marcus needed, and he would have to come back? No mystical answer came, but as I sat among the roses she had planted, I could almost hear her pragmatic voice. Life has a way of bringing us full circle, Olivia. The question is what we do when we find ourselves back where we started. The next morning, I called the transplant center and scheduled preliminary testing. As a healthcare professional, I knew the process well: blood typing, tissue matching, extensive physical and psychological evaluation. I knew the risks of living with one kidney, the recovery time, the potential complications. What I didn't know was whether I could give this gift without resentment. Whether Marcus and I could rebuild what had been broken. Whether my family would ever truly understand why Grandma Ellie had made the choice she did. But as I hung up the phone, I realized something important. This wasn't just about Marcus or our family drama. This was about who I was at my core, the caregiver, the healer, the person who had devoted her life to helping others survive. Whatever happened next, I needed to make this decision based on my values, not on the complicated history between us. 3 years earlier, Marcus had looked me in the eyes and said I wasn't family. Now, we were bound by something more fundamental than a house or a will or even shared history. We were bound by the possibility that my body might contain exactly what he needed to survive. Family, I was beginning to understand, was far more complicated than I had ever imagined. And sometimes, the greatest test of love wasn't what you were willing to give, but what you were willing to forgive. As I drove to work that morning, I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, not yet. But the possibility of it. The first tentative step toward healing a wound that had seemed beyond repair. And that, I thought, might be exactly what Grandma Ellie had hoped for all along. The week that followed my decision to get tested was a blur of medical appointments and emotional upheaval. The transplant center moved with surprising speed once they understood the urgency of Marcus's condition. His kidney function had deteriorated to just 12%, placing him dangerously close to complete failure. Without dialysis 3 times a week, his body would quickly become overwhelmed by toxins that his kidneys could no longer filter. I found myself in a strange limbo, simultaneously a medical professional and a potential patient. During blood draws, I made small talk with phlebotomists about difficult veins. During consultations, I asked questions my patients would never think to ask, watching the doctors' expressions shift as they realized I understood the medical terminology they were using. Initial results looked promising, Dr. Patel, the transplant surgeon, told me 5 days after my first blood test. Her office was minimalist but warm, with plants on every surface and framed photos of what I assumed were previous transplant recipients. Your blood type is compatible, and preliminary tissue typing suggests you might be a good match. We'll need to run more comprehensive tests, of course. Of course, I echoed, feeling strangely detached from the conversation despite its life-altering implications. Ms. Reyes, Dr. Patel said, leaning forward slightly, I notice you haven't asked many questions about the recovery process or potential risks to you as a donor. As someone in healthcare, you likely understand the basics, but I want to make sure you're fully informed. I nodded, grateful for her directness. I work with cancer patients, not transplant recipients. I understand the generalities but not necessarily the specifics. Dr. Patel spent the next 40 minutes explaining everything in methodical detail. The laparoscopic procedure they would use to remove my kidney, the 4 to 6 weeks of recovery, the lifetime of monitoring to ensure my remaining kidney stayed healthy. She discussed rare but serious complications like bleeding, infection, and the long-term slightly elevated risk of high blood pressure or reduced kidney function. And then there are the psychological aspects, she added, studying my face carefully. Donating an organ is an emotional process, especially when it's for a family member. Our team includes a psychologist who works specifically with donors to address any feelings of obligation, resentment, or anxiety. My brother and I have a complicated relationship, I admitted. It was the understatement of the century. That's not uncommon, Dr. Patel said with a gentle smile. In fact, family dynamics are often quite complex in these situations. The psychological evaluation isn't about disqualifying donors with complicated feelings, it's about ensuring you're making this decision for the right reasons and with a clear understanding of all its dimensions. As I left her office, I wondered what the right reasons actually were. Was I doing this out of lingering love for the brother who had protected me as a child? Out of obligation as a healthcare provider who had sworn to alleviate suffering? Or was there a part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, that wanted Marcus to be forever indebted to me, to know that I had saved his life after he had discarded me from his? The psychological evaluation was scheduled for the following week. But in the meantime, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Can we talk? In person? We met at a coffee shop halfway between my house and his apartment, neutral territory where neither of us would have the home field advantage. I arrived early, claiming a corner table and ordering a chai latte that I didn't really want but needed something to do with my hands. Marcus looked marginally better than he had during his visit to the house. The dark circles under his eyes had lightened somewhat, and he had more color in his face. He ordered black coffee and sat across from me, his movements still unnaturally careful, as if his body had become a fragile vessel he didn't quite trust. Dr. Fernandez called me, he said after an awkward greeting. She said the initial tests look promising. That's what they told me too, I confirmed. There are more tests scheduled for next week. Marcus nodded, turning his coffee cup in slow circles without drinking from it. Liv, I need to know something. Are you doing this because you want to, or because you feel obligated? The directness of his question caught me off guard. The Marcus I remembered would have danced around difficult topics, using charm and deflection to avoid emotional vulnerability. Both, I think, I answered honestly. I can't separate the part of me that would do this for any person in need from the part that still sees you as my brother, despite everything. He flinched slightly at the despite everything, but nodded. That's fair. I wouldn't want you to pretend the last 3 years didn't happen. Why did you cut me off so completely? I asked, the question that had haunted me for 3 years. Finally finding voice. I understand being angry about the house, but to say I wasn't family anymore. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, still rotating his untouched coffee. It wasn't just about the house, he finally said. It was about what the house represented. Grandma choosing you over me. It felt like confirmation of something I'd always suspected, that you were the better grandchild, the better child, the better person. That's not true, I protested. Grandma loved you. Everyone loved you. You were always the golden child. He laughed without humor. Is that how you saw it? God, Liv, you were the responsible one, the smart one, the one who never screwed up. Do you have any idea what it's like growing up with a sister who sets the bar so high no one else can reach it? I stared at him, genuinely shocked. All my life, I had felt like the reliable but unremarkable sibling, standing in the shadow of Marcus's charisma and natural talents. The idea that he had envied me seemed absurd. Mom and Dad adored you, I said. They gave you everything. They gave me things, Marcus corrected. Cars and allowances and second chances. But they respected you. There's a difference. We sat in silence, digesting this mutual revelation, that each of us had envied something in the other that we had never recognized as valuable in ourselves. The house was the final straw, Marcus continued. When Grandma left it to you, it felt like the universe confirming what I'd always feared, that I wasn't good enough. That I wasn't worthy of the family legacy. So I decided if I wasn't worthy of being part of the family, I might as well not be family at all. That's twisted logic, I said softly. I was angry and hurt, he shrugged. Logic wasn't really my priority. And now? I asked. What are your priorities now? Marcus finally met my eyes directly. Survival, obviously. But also, making amends, if that's possible. Seeing what you've done with the house, turning it into a place that helps sick kids, it made me realize Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She saw something in you that I was too self-absorbed to see. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Why didn't you come to me when you first got sick? Why wait until you were desperate? Pride, he admitted immediately. Shame. Fear that you'd reject me the way I rejected you. Take your pick. I would never have rejected you, I said, and knew it was true even as the words left my mouth. Despite everything, I would never have turned my back on him in a medical crisis. I know that now, Marcus said quietly. I've known it all along, really. That's what made it so hard to reach out. You really are the better person, Liv. I shook my head. This isn't about being better or worse. It's about being family, even when it's complicated. As we finished our coffee and prepared to leave, Marcus hesitated, then pulled something from his jacket pocket. I found this in my old stuff when I was moving out of my girlfriend's place. Thought you might want it. It was a faded Polaroid photo of the two of us in Grandma Ellie's garden, probably 15 years earlier. I was laughing, my braces catching the sunlight, while Marcus had his arms slung around my shoulders, looking down at me with unmistakable affection. We were surrounded by the same rose bushes that still bloomed there, though they had been smaller then, newly planted by Grandma's hopeful hands. I remember this day, I said softly. You had just taught me to ride a bike without training wheels. You were scared but determined, Marcus nodded. You fell 6 times before you got it right. 7, I corrected. You counted. But you didn't give up, he said. You never gave up on anything. Until recently, I admitted. I almost gave up on us ever being family again. Marcus's eyes filled with the same tears I'd seen during his visit to the house. I wouldn't blame you if you had. We parted with an awkward half-hug, the first physical contact we'd had in 3 years. As I drove home, I placed the Polaroid on my passenger seat, a tangible reminder of a time when our relationship had been simple and unbroken. The following week brought more intensive medical testing and the scheduled psychological evaluation. Dr. Miranda Chen, the transplant psychologist, had an office that felt more like a living room than a clinical space, with comfortable armchairs and soft lighting that invited confidences. The purpose of this evaluation isn't to judge you or your motivations, she explained as I settled into an armchair across from her. It's to ensure you're making an informed decision that you're unlikely to regret, and to help you prepare for the emotional aspects of organ donation. For the next 2 hours, Dr. Chen guided me through a conversation that touched on every aspect of my relationship with Marcus, from childhood memories to the inheritance dispute to our recent reconnection. She asked thoughtful questions about my expectations for our relationship post-transplant, my concerns about recovery, and my understanding of the permanent nature of donation. "What happens if the transplant fails?" she asked at one point. "How would that affect you emotionally?" The question struck me like a physical blow. In all my medical preparations, I had somehow avoided considering this possibility, that my kidney might not save Marcus, that all of this might be for nothing. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been so focused on the procedure itself, I haven't really thought beyond it." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's not unusual. Many donors focus on the immediate goal of helping their loved one. But transplants aren't guarantees. There's a possibility of rejection, of technical complications, of the disease recurring in the transplanted organ. As a medical professional, I understand the risks," I said. "But I think I've been compartmentalizing, keeping my nurse brain separate from my sister brain. That's a common coping mechanism," Dr. Chen smiled. "But I'd like you to integrate those perspectives before the surgery. The more prepared you are for all possibilities, the better you'll be able to handle whatever comes next." By the end of our session, I felt emotionally drained but clearer about my motivations. Yes, there was a complex mixture of love, obligation, and even a desire for reconciliation driving my decision. But underlying it all was a simple truth: I had the power to help someone who needed it, and withholding that help out of anger or resentment would contradict everything I believed about compassion and healing. "You're an excellent candidate. From a psychological perspective," Dr. Chen concluded. "You have realistic expectations, a strong support system, and healthy coping mechanisms. But I want you to continue thinking about our conversation, particularly about your expectations for your relationship with your brother post-transplant." On the drive home, I found myself doing exactly that, wondering what Marcus and I would be to each other after surgery. Would the physical connection of my kidney inside his body create a bridge across the chasm that had opened between us? Or would the weight of such an enormous gift create a different kind of imbalance, a debt too large to ever be repaid? I was still pondering these questions when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's name, a rare occurrence since the inheritance dispute. "Olivia," she said, her voice tight with what might have been tears or tension. "Have you spoken to Marcus today?" "Not since our coffee meeting yesterday," I replied, immediately concerned. "Why? What's happened?" "He's in the hospital. His blood pressure spiked dangerously high during dialysis, and they're keeping him for observation. Your father and I are here now, but he's been asking for you." The hospital where Marcus had been admitted was across town from Grandma Ellie's house. I drove there directly from my appointment with Dr. Chen, still wearing the professional clothes I'd chosen to make a good impression during my psychological evaluation. The irony wasn't lost on me, dressing up to prove I was mentally stable enough to donate an organ, only to rush to the potential recipient's bedside before I'd even been officially approved. The nephrology floor was familiar territory for me as a healthcare professional, but entering it as a family member felt disorienting. The antiseptic smell, the soft beeping of monitors, the hushed conversations of medical staff, all were part of my daily work environment, yet suddenly they seemed threatening rather than routine. My parents were sitting in the small waiting area, both looking older than I remembered. Mom's hair had more gray than I'd noticed before, and Dad's shoulders were slightly stooped, as if the weight of Marcus's illness physically pressed down on him. "Olivia," Mom said, standing to greet me with an awkward half-hug. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course," I replied, surprised by the formality in her voice. "How is he?" "Stable now," Dad answered. "They think it was a combination of fluid overload and his blood pressure medication needing adjustment. They're going to try a different dialysis prescription tomorrow." The technical terminology sounded strange coming from my football coach father, who had always dealt with physical challenges through motivational speeches rather than medical interventions. He must have been researching kidney disease extensively, trying to understand what was happening to his son. "Can I see him?" I asked. Mom nodded. "Room 412. He's tired but awake." Neither of them moved to accompany me, which seemed both a courtesy and an admission that whatever happened between Marcus and me was our business alone. As I walked down the corridor toward his room, I realized this was the first time my parents had acknowledged, even tacitly, that my relationship with Marcus existed independently of them. Marcus looked small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and in 4-line. The room had the impersonal neatness of all hospital spaces, with only a water bottle and a phone charger suggesting human occupation. When he saw me in the doorway, his face lit up with a shadow of his old smile. "Twice in 2 days," he said, his voice raspy. Lucky me. I hear you're giving the dialysis nurses a hard time, I replied, falling into the easy banter of healthcare professionals discussing a difficult patient. Just keeping them on their toes, he shrugged, then winced as the movement disturbed his fore. Seriously, though, you didn't have to come. They're just being cautious. I pulled up a chair beside his bed. When the transplant coordinator hears about this, they'll probably fast-track my evaluation. Is that good news or bad news for you? He asked, studying my face with unexpected perceptiveness. Good news for you, I answered, dodging the question. The sooner we can get you off dialysis, the better. Marcus wasn't fooled. That's not what I asked, Liv. Are you having second thoughts? The directness of his question reminded me of our coffee shop conversation. This new version of my brother, straightforward, vulnerable, perceptive, was still unfamiliar to me. Not second thoughts exactly, I said carefully. Just realizing how complicated this all is. Not medically, but emotionally. He nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that too. About what it means to carry a piece of someone else inside you. Especially someone you've hurt. I don't want you to see this as a debt, I said, finally articulating the concern that had been growing since my conversation with Dr. Chen. If I do this, when I do this, it's not something you have to spend your life trying to repay. How could I not? Marcus asked simply. You're literally giving me life. How do you repay something like that? You don't, I insisted. That's not how gifts work. This isn't exactly a birthday present, Liv. No, but the principle is the same. A true gift comes without strings attached. Otherwise, it's not a gift, it's a transaction. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the four in his arm. Is that how Grandma saw the house? As a gift without strings? The question caught me off guard. We had barely discussed Grandma Ellie or the inheritance since his reappearance in my life. Both of us tacitly agreeing to focus on the present crisis rather than past grievances. I think so, I said slowly. But I also think she hoped I would use it in a way that honored what it meant to her. Not as an obligation, but as, I don't know, a continuation. The way you're using it now, Marcus nodded. With the wellness center. Yes. Though I didn't fully understand that until after you were gone. I hesitated, then added, I wish you could have seen it from the beginning. I think it might have helped you understand why she made the choice she did. I couldn't have seen it then, Marcus admitted. I was too caught up in my own hurt to see anything clearly. It took getting sick to put things in perspective. That's a hard way to gain perspective. Better late than never, he shrugged, then grimaced again. At the pain the movement caused. Liv, if something happens to me before the transplant, or if the transplant doesn't work, don't, I interrupted. We're not having that conversation. We need to, he insisted. I need you to know that I understand now. About the house. About Grandma's choice, about who you are. Whether I get your kidney or not, whether I survive this or not, I was wrong to cut you out of my life. You've always been my family, even when I was too stubborn to admit it. Tears filled my eyes, and I reached for his hand, careful not to disturb the four. You're going to survive this, I said firmly. And we're going to have decades to figure out how to be siblings again. That's the only outcome I'm willing to consider. A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Time for vitals and medication, she announced, her cheerful efficiency a reminder that to hospital staff, this was just another room, another patient, another family drama playing out against the backdrop of medical necessity. I should go, I said, standing. Let you rest. Come back tomorrow? Marcus asked, and for a moment I could hear the echo of the little boy who had followed me around our childhood home, asking to be included in my games and projects. Of course, I promised. As I left the hospital, the sunset was painting the western sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about perspective, how getting sick had given Marcus a new way of seeing our shared past, how Grandma Ellie's death had forced me to consider what legacy truly meant, how the possibility of donation was reshaping my understanding of what it meant to be family. 3 years ago, I had sat in Grandma Ellie's garden and asked for guidance that never came in any mystical form. Now, walking through the hospital parking lot, I felt a sudden certainty that would have seemed like the answer I'd been seeking if I were a more superstitious person. The path forward wasn't about forgiveness or obligation or even love in any simple sense. It was about recognizing that Marcus and I were connected by something deeper than shared history or DNA or even a possible organ donation. We were connected by the simple, profound truth that we had shaped each other's lives in ways neither of us had fully understood until now. Whatever happened next, whether the transplant succeeded or failed, whether our relationship healed completely or remained complicated, that connection could never truly be severed, no matter what angry words had been spoken or how much time had passed. As I drove home through the gathering darkness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years: hope. Not just for Marcus's physical recovery, but for the possibility that something broken might be mended, that something lost might be found again. The house was dark when I arrived, but as I turned on lights and moved through rooms that had become truly mine over the past 3 years, I imagined Grandma Ellie watching with satisfaction. Not because she had been proven right about leaving me the house, but because the family legacy she had entrusted to me might yet include her grandson as well, not through property or inheritance, but through the complicated, messy, essential bond of siblinghood that had been tested but not destroyed. That night, I placed the Polaroid Marcus had given me on my bedside table, a reminder of what had been and what might be again. In the morning, I would call the transplant coordinator and tell her I was ready for whatever came next. The call came on a Thursday afternoon as I was finishing my shift at the pediatric oncology ward. The transplant coordinator's name flashed across my screen, and I stepped into an empty consultation room to answer, heart pounding. Olivia Reyes? This is Natalie from the transplant center. I have your final results. I gripped the phone tighter, suddenly aware of every heartbeat, every breath. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus's hospital admission, 3 weeks of additional tests and evaluations, 3 weeks of waiting to learn whether my body held the key to my brother's survival. I'm here, I managed. Your results are excellent, Natalie said, her professional tone tinged with genuine warmth. You're a remarkably good match for your brother, better than we typically see even between siblings. Dr. Patel would like to schedule the surgery as soon as possible, given Marcus's declining function. Are you available to come in tomorrow? To discuss dates? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I can be there at any time. After hanging up, I stood motionless in the consultation room, processing what I had just learned. I was a match. A remarkably good match. The abstract possibility of donation had suddenly become concrete reality, with surgery dates and recovery timelines looming in the immediate future. Dr. Reyes? Are you okay? I turned to see Amelia, one of our pediatric nurses, standing in the doorway with concern on her face. I'm fine, I said automatically, then corrected myself. Actually, I just found out I'm a kidney match for my brother. They want to schedule the surgery right away. Amelia's eyes widened. That's huge, Liv. How are you feeling about it? The simple question unlocked something in me, permission to acknowledge the complex swirl of emotions I'd been suppressing beneath medical terminology and practical arrangements. Terrified, I admitted. Relieved. Overwhelmed. Hopeful. All completely normal, she assured me, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. My sister donated a kidney to my dad 5 years ago. She said the decision to donate was easy, but the reality of it was much more complicated. That's exactly it, I nodded. I never questioned whether I would do this if I could. But now that it's happening, it's a lot, Amelia finished for me. Medically and emotionally. I thought about what Dr. Chen had said about integrating my nurse brain and my sister brain. Here was an opportunity to do exactly that. What was your sister's recovery like? I asked. The real version, not the sanitized one they give potential donors. Amelia smiled. Harder than she expected, honestly. The pain was manageable but more persistent than she anticipated. She was more emotionally fragile than she'd prepared for, crying at commercials, snapping at people who were trying to help. And she wasn't ready for how protective she'd feel about the kidney she'd given Dad, like it was still hers somehow even though it was in his body. The description was more honest than anything I'd heard in my medical consultations, and I appreciated it immensely. Thank you for that, I said. Most people are walking on eggshells around me, like they're afraid I'll change my mind if they tell me how hard it might be. You're not most people, Amelia pointed out. You're a healthcare professional who works with critically ill children every day. You can handle the unvarnished truth. She was right. In my work with pediatric cancer patients, I had learned that honesty, delivered with compassion but without sugarcoating, was the greatest gift I could offer families navigating impossible situations. Now I needed that same honesty for myself. I should call Marcus, I said, reaching for my phone again. And then you should take some time for yourself, Amelia advised. This is big news. Give yourself space to process it. After sharing the news with Marcus, whose voice broke with emotion as he thanked me repeatedly, I drove to the coast. The Pacific Ocean had always been my thinking place, the vastness of the water helping to put my human concerns in perspective. I kicked off my shoes and walked along the shoreline, letting the cold waves wash over my feet as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. What would it feel like to wake up with 1 kidney instead of 2? To carry a surgical scar on my abdomen for the rest of my life? To know that part of my physical self was living inside my brother's body? These questions had no answers yet. Only the certainty that I would soon find out. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and headed back to my car. Whatever fears or uncertainties I had about the surgery, one thing was clear: I was ready to move forward, ready to take this irrevocable step toward healing both my brother's body and our fractured relationship. The pre-surgery meeting the next day was a blur of consent forms, surgical explanations, and scheduling details. The procedure was set for the following Wednesday, less than a week away. Everything was happening faster than I had anticipated, a reminder of how serious Marcus's condition had become. "We'll perform the surgeries simultaneously," Dr. Patel explained, using a model of the kidneys to demonstrate the procedure. "You'll be in operating room 1, and Marcus will be in operating room 2. We'll remove your left kidney laparoscopic, meaning we'll make several small incisions rather than one large one. Then we'll immediately transport it to the adjacent or for transplantation." The clinical description helped settle my nerves. This was a medical procedure like any other, complex but routine for the specialized surgical team. "How soon after surgery will we know if the transplant is successful?" I asked. "We'll have immediate indicators about blood flow and initial function," Dr. Patel replied. "But the first 24 to 48 hours are critical for monitoring signs of rejection or technical complications. Barring any issues, Marcus should experience improved kidney function almost immediately." As we finished the meeting, Dr. Patel hesitated, then added something that hadn't been part of her clinical explanation. "Ms. Reyes, what you're doing for your brother is extraordinary. As a transplant surgeon, I've seen how these procedures can heal not just bodies, but relationships as well. Whatever happens after the surgery, know that your decision to donate is a profound act of love." Her words stayed with me as I left the hospital and drove to my parents' house for dinner, the first time I had been there since the inheritance dispute 3 years earlier. Mom had called that morning after speaking with Marcus, insisting that we needed to be together as a family before the surgery. Pulling into the familiar driveway felt like stepping back in time. The house looked exactly the same, the blue shutters my father repainted every other summer, the cherry tree we had planted on my 10th birthday, the porch swing where I had read countless books during long summer afternoons. Yet everything was different, altered by the events of the past 3 years and the surgery looming in our immediate future. Mom opened the door before I could knock, as if she had been watching for my car. "Olivia," she said, and then she was hugging me, a real hug, not the awkward half-embrace we had shared at the hospital. "Thank you for coming." The house smelled like pot roast and fresh bread, Mom's standard menu for significant family occasions. Dad was in the living room, standing awkwardly as if unsure of the protocol for greeting a daughter he had barely spoken to in 3 years. "Liv," he said finally, clearing his throat. "You look well." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, wondering if we would address the elephant in the room or simply pretend the estrangement had never happened. Marcus was the last to arrive, moving slowly but looking better than he had in the hospital. The 4 of us gathered around the dining room table, the same table where we had eaten countless family meals, celebrated birthdays, argued about curfews, and shared ordinary moments that seemed precious in retrospect. Dinner began with stilted small talk, comments about the food, questions about my drive over, observations about the unseasonably warm weather. It wasn't until Mom brought out dessert, apple pie, my childhood favorite, that Dad finally addressed what none of us had mentioned. "Olivia," he said, setting down his fork with deliberate care. "Your mother and I owe you an apology. The way we handled the situation with your grandmother's house was wrong. We were so focused on what seemed fair to Marcus that we failed to consider what was fair to you." The directness of his words surprised me. My father had never been one for emotional conversations or admitting mistakes. "We should have respected Eleanor's decision," Mom added, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Instead, we pressured you to give up something that was rightfully yours. And when you refused, we punished you for it." "We were wrong," Dad concluded. Simply. "And I'm sorry it's taken us this long to say so." The apology I had longed for during 3 years of estrangement landed differently than I had imagined. Instead of vindication or triumph, I felt a complex mixture of relief, sadness for lost time, and cautious hope for what might come next. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "I never wanted to cause a family rift. I just needed to honor Grandma's wishes." "We understand that now," Mom nodded. "Seeing what you've created at the house, the wellness center for those children. It's made us realize that Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing when she left it to you." Marcus had been quiet throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up. "I've been thinking a lot about what happens after the transplant," he said, his gaze moving between our parents and me. "About what kind of brother I want to be going forward." "You don't need to worry about that now," Mom said quickly. "Just focus on getting well." No, this is important, Marcus insisted. For 3 years, I've let pride and hurt feelings keep me from my sister. I'm not going to waste any more time once I have her kidney inside me. The bluntness of his statement made Mom gasp slightly, but I appreciated his honesty. This wasn't a time for euphemisms or dancing around difficult truths. What are you saying exactly? Dad asked. I'm saying that after the surgery, I want us to be a real family again, Marcus replied. Not just pretending everything is fine when we're all walking on eggshells, but actually dealing with our issues. Maybe even family therapy, if Liv is open to it. Family therapy had never been part of our family's vocabulary. The Reyes' approach to problems had always been stoic silence followed by eventual pretending that nothing had happened. Marcus's suggestion represented a seismic shift in how we might relate to each other going forward. I'd be open to that, I said, surprised and touched by his willingness to do the emotional work of rebuilding our relationship. We would too, Mom said quickly, with a glance at Dad that suggested this might not have been previously discussed between them. After a moment's hesitation, Dad nodded his agreement. As I drove home that night, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. The surgery hadn't even happened yet, but the decision to donate had already begun a healing process that extended far beyond Marcus's physical health. It was as if the act of giving had created space for receiving as well, receiving apologies, receiving honesty, receiving the possibility of a restored family. The days before the surgery passed in a flurry of practical preparations. I arranged for extended medical leave from the hospital, set up a recovery space in my bedroom, and organized a rotation of friends to help with meals and transportation during the first few weeks after surgery. Emma, my closest friend from nursing school, insisted on staying at the house for the initial recovery period, setting up camp in the guest room with her laptop and an excessive supply of medical-grade sanitizer. You realize I'm a nurse, right? I teased as she installed what appeared to be a small pharmacy on my kitchen counter. I know how to change a dressing. And you also know that medical professionals make the worst patients, she countered. You'll be trying to clean the gutters 3 days post-op if someone doesn't stop you. She wasn't entirely wrong. My instinct was always to push through pain, to minimize my own needs, to be the caregiver rather than the one receiving care. Learning to accept help would be its own challenge during recovery. The night before surgery, I canceled the weekend wellness program at Willow Wellness and walked through Grandma Ellie's garden one last time before the procedure. The roses were beginning to bloom, their fragrance filling the evening air as the sun set behind the neighboring houses. I sat on the stone bench near the fountain, listening to the gentle splash of water and trying to center myself for what was to come. I think I understand now, Grandma, I said aloud, not caring if any neighbors might overhear me talking to myself. Why you left me the house. It wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. About creating a space where healing could happen. No mystical answer came, of course. Just the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze and the distant sound of a neighbor's wind chimes. But sitting there in the garden she had loved, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for weeks. Whatever happened tomorrow, whether the transplant was successful or not, I had made the right decision. Not just for Marcus, but for myself and for our family. Emma drove me to the hospital at 5:30 the next morning, the streets nearly empty as the city slept. The surgical prep area was brightly lit and bustling with activity despite the early hour. I changed into a hospital gown, answered the same medical questions I had already answered multiple times, and signed the final consent forms with a surprisingly steady hand. Your brother is in the next bay, the pre-op nurse informed me. Would you like to see him before we take you both to the OR? I nodded, suddenly desperate to speak to Marcus one last time before surgery. The nurse pulled the curtain aside, revealing Marcus in an identical hospital gown, and 4 already established in his arm, his face pale but determined. Hey, he said softly. Big day. The biggest, I agreed, trying for lightness despite the gravity of the moment. Liv, he started, then stopped, struggling for words. I don't know how to thank you for this. You don't have to, I said simply. We're family. I know, but, he tried again, his eyes filling with tears. After everything I said. Everything I did, Marcus, I interrupted gently. We have the rest of our lives to talk about the past. Right now, let's just focus on getting through today. He nodded, reaching for my hand. I'm scared, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Me too, I confessed. But we've got the best surgical team, and apparently I'm a remarkably good match for you. Always have been, probably. A ghost of his old smile appeared. Yeah, who would have thought? The golden boy and the responsible one, turns out we're compatible after all. The surgical team arrived then, ready to transport us to our respective operating rooms. As they began to wheel Marcus's gurney away, he called out one last thing, I love you, sis. I'll see you on the other side. I love you too, I replied, surprised by how easily the words came after 3 years of silence. Take good care of my kidney. The operating room was colder than I expected, the lights harsh and bright. As the anesthesiologist prepared to administer the drugs that would send me into unconsciousness, I had a sudden moment of perfect clarity. Throughout my life, I had often felt invisible, the reliable daughter whose accomplishments were noted but not celebrated, the sister whose stability was taken for granted while her brother's charm was admired. But in this moment, on this table, I was doing something extraordinary. I was giving life. I was making a choice that no one else could make, a choice that might heal not just my brother's body but our family's brokenness as well. Can you count backward from 10 for me? The anesthesiologist asked, injecting something into my 4. 10, 9, 8. My last conscious thought before darkness claimed me was not of fear or doubt, but of profound gratitude, that I had the power to give this gift, that my body was strong enough to share itself, that after years of feeling like the invisible sibling, I was finally, unmistakably seen. I woke to the muffled sounds of medical equipment and hushed voices. My throat was dry, my abdomen throbbing with a dull, persistent pain that intensified when I tried to move. A nurse noticed I was awake and approached the bed, checking the monitors beside me. Welcome back, Ms. Reyes, she said warmly. The surgery went very well. Dr. Patel will be in shortly to give you all the details. My brother? I managed, my voice raspy from the intubation tube that had been removed while I was still unconscious. Also doing well, she assured me. The transplanted kidney is functioning beautifully so far. Relief washed over me, stronger than the pain medication flowing through my 4. It had worked. My kidney, now Marcus's kidney, was doing what it was supposed to do inside his body. Dr. Patel arrived a few minutes later, her surgical cap replaced by a neat bun, her face showing the satisfaction of a successful procedure. The surgery couldn't have gone better, she reported. We were able to complete the nephrectomy laparoscopic as planned, and the kidney was transplanted into your brother without any complications. Initial function is excellent, better than we typically see even with living donor transplants. When can I see him? I asked. Tomorrow morning, if all continues to go well, Dr. Patel replied. You both need rest tonight. Your parents are with him now, and they'll be in to see you next. Mom and Dad arrived shortly after, their faces showing the strain of having 2 children in surgery simultaneously. Mom immediately began fussing with my blankets and pillow, while Dad stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, clearly uncomfortable in the hospital setting but determined to be present. Marcus is doing wonderfully, Mom reported. His color is already better, and his lab values are improving by the hour. The doctors are amazed at how quickly his body is accepting the kidney. Your kidney, Dad corrected, his voice gruff with emotion. What you did today, Olivia, it's beyond anything I could have imagined. You've given your brother his life back. It's what anyone would do, I said, the standard deflection of someone uncomfortable with praise. No, Dad shook his head firmly. It's not what anyone would do. It's what you did, because of who you are. I've never been more proud to be your father. The simple statement, I've never been more proud, struck me with unexpected force. How long had I waited to hear those words? How many achievements had gone unnoticed or been taken for granted while Marcus's smallest accomplishments were celebrated? Yet here, in this hospital room, with surgical pain radiating through my abdomen and monitors tracking my vital signs, my father was finally seeing me, not as the reliable daughter who needed no acknowledgement, but as someone extraordinary. Thank you, Dad, I whispered, too moved to say more. The next morning, a nurse helped me out of bed for the first time, supporting me as I shuffled painfully to a wheelchair. The simple act of sitting upright sent waves of discomfort through my abdomen, but I was determined to see Marcus. They wheeled me to his room in the transplant recovery unit, where he was sitting up in bed, looking remarkably alert despite the surgical incision and multiple 4 lines. The moment he saw me, his face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen in years. The uninhibited, joyful expression of the brother I had grown up with, before adult complications had come between us. There she is, he said, his voice stronger than I had heard it in months. The woman of the hour. How are you feeling? I asked, allowing the nurse to help me from the wheelchair to a chair beside his bed. Like someone cut me open and put a new organ inside me, he joked, then grew serious. But better than I have in a year. The doctors can't believe how well your kidney is working. They keep using words like optimal and exceptional. That's because it's a superior Reyes kidney, I replied, falling into our old pattern of banter. Only the best for my big brother. Marcus reached for my hand, his expression sobering. Liv, I've been thinking about what happens next. Not just the recovery, but after, when we're both back home and dealing with normal life again. What about it? I asked. I want to move back to Portland, he said. My job in Seattle is fine, but it's nothing I can't do from here. And I think I want to be closer to family now. To mom and dad, and especially to you. The idea of Marcus returning to Portland, of having my brother back in my daily life after 3 years of estrangement, was both thrilling and terrifying. What would our relationship look like now? How would the dynamics shift with this enormous gift between us? Are you sure? I asked cautiously. This isn't just gratitude talking? It's partly gratitude, he admitted. But it's more than that. Getting sick, facing my own mortality, it's made me reconsider everything. What matters, who matters? And you matter, Liv. You've always mattered, even when I was too angry to admit it. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the beeping of his monitors a steady reminder of where we were and what we had just been through together. There's something else, Marcus said finally. Something I want to talk to you about once we're both recovered. What's that? The house, he said, and my heart immediately tensed, preparing for the old argument to resurface. But what he said next surprised me completely. I want to help with Willow Wellness. Not as an owner or anything, the house is yours, exactly. As Grandma wanted. But maybe as a volunteer, or even staff eventually. I've been researching pediatric cancer support programs, and what you're doing, it's important work. I stared at him, searching for any sign that this was manipulation or an attempt to insinuate himself into my inheritance after all. But his eyes held nothing but sincerity and something else, the same passion I felt when working with my young cancer survivors. You're serious, I said, not quite a question. Completely, he nodded. I've spent my whole life chasing the wrong things, status, easy money, superficial relationships. Maybe it's time I tried something that actually matters. As the nurse came to take me back to my room, warning that I had been up long enough for my first post-operative day, I felt a sense of possibility opening before us, not just of physical recovery, but of something new being built between us. Something stronger and more honest than what had existed before. We'll talk about it when you're stronger, I promised Marcus as they wheeled me toward the door. But I think Grandma would like that idea very much. His smile, tired but genuine, was the last thing I saw as they took me back to my room, where I slept deeply for the first time since agreeing to be tested as a donor, dreams filled. Not with medical procedures or family conflicts, but with children laughing in Grandma Ellie's garden, Marcus among them, teaching a young boy with a hospital bracelet how to plant sunflower seeds in the rich, dark earth. Recovery moved in two parallel timelines, the physical and the emotional. The physical was predictable, marked by decreasing pain medication, gradually improving mobility, and the slow healing of surgical wounds. The emotional recovery was far less linear, with unexpected moments of connection interspersed with awkward silences and tentative attempts at rebuilding trust. I was discharged from the hospital 5 days after the surgery, returning to Grandma Ellie's house with Emma hovering at my side like an anxious mother hen. My bedroom had been transformed into a recovery suite, with extra pillows for elevating my legs, a small refrigerator stocked with electrolyte drinks, and a carefully arranged selection of books and magazines within easy reach. You've thought of everything, I said as Emma helped me settle into bed. That's because I know you, she replied, adjusting my pillows with professional efficiency. Left to your own devices, you'd be trying to reorganize the linen closet by tomorrow morning. She wasn't wrong. Accepting help had never been my strong suit, and the enforced dependence of early recovery chafed against my natural inclination toward self-sufficiency. The simple acts of showering, dressing, and preparing food required assistance, each request for help a small surrender of the independence I had always prized. Marcus remained in the hospital for 2 weeks, his recovery more complex than mine. Due to the immunosuppressive medications necessary to prevent his body from rejecting my kidney. Mom and Dad divided their time between his hospital room and my house, bringing updates on his progress and awkwardly attempting to bridge the gap created by 3 years of estrangement. His creatinine levels are almost normal, Dad reported. During one visit, using medical terminology that had become part of our family's vocabulary overnight. The doctors say they rarely see such good function this early after transplant. That's great news, I said, genuinely relieved. The possibility of rejection had haunted my dreams since the surgery, the fear that my gift might fail despite our excellent match. He's asking about you constantly, Mom added, arranging flowers in a vase beside my bed. Wants to know how you're feeling, if you're resting properly, if you need anything. The role reversal was striking. My whole life, I had been the one who worried about Marcus, about his grades, his risky behavior, his tendency to leap without looking. Now he was concerned about me, his typical self-absorption replaced by a focused interest in my well-being. Tell him I'm fine, I said. Just taking it one day at a time. 3 weeks after the surgery, Marcus was finally discharged. Instead of returning to his apartment in Seattle, he moved temporarily into our parents' house, where Mom could fuss over his medication schedule and Dad could drive him to his thrice-weekly clinic appointments. His first visit to Grandma Ellie's house, my house, came a week later. I was sitting in the garden, enjoying the late spring sunshine and the simple pleasure of being outdoors after weeks of convalescence. The sound of the front door opening made me turn, and there he was, moving slowly but steadily down the garden path. "Should you be driving yet?" I asked, noticing the car keys in his hand. "Probably not," he admitted with a sheepish grin. "Don't tell Mom." He lowered himself carefully onto the bench beside me, both of us moving with the deliberate caution of the recently operated upon. For a moment we sat in companionable silence, listening to the birds and the distant sound of neighborhood children playing. "How does it feel?" I asked finally. "Having my kidney?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Strange," he admitted. "Not physically, I can't actually feel it as something separate from myself. But knowing it's there, knowing it came from you, it's hard to describe." "Try," I encouraged. He gazed out at the garden, searching for words. "It's like carrying a piece of someone else's story inside you. Like I have an obligation not just to keep the kidney healthy, but to be worthy of what you gave up to give it to me." "I didn't give it up," I corrected gently. "I shared it." "There's a difference." "Still," he insisted. "Every morning when I take my anti-rejection meds, I think about what you did and who you are. It's changing me, Liv. Not just physically." The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had felt invisible in my own family. The reliable one whose contributions were expected rather than celebrated. Now, Marcus was not only seeing me but recognizing how my essence was literally becoming part of him. "I brought something for you," he said, reaching carefully into his jacket pocket. "A sort of 3-week kidneyversary gift." He handed me a small velvet box, the kind that typically holds jewelry. Inside was a silver bracelet, delicately crafted with a single charm, a kidney bean-shaped pendant engraved with the date of our surgery. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "And only slightly weird." Marcus laughed, the sound startlingly like his old self. "I figured we either embrace the weirdness or pretend it isn't there. And after everything that's happened, I'm done with pretending." I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, the silver cool against my skin. "No more pretending," I agreed. "It hasn't worked out well for our family so far." That visit marked the beginning of a new pattern. Marcus started coming to the house regularly, initially just to sit and talk, then gradually becoming involved in small projects, replanting a section of the garden that had become overgrown, helping me organize medical supplies for Willow Wellness, researching grant opportunities for program expansion. 6 weeks after the surgery, I returned to work part-time, easing back into my role at the pediatric oncology ward with modified duties that accommodated my still healing body. The first day back, I was greeted with a surprise party by my colleagues, complete with a cake decorated with a cartoon kidney and the words "Hero Nurse" in bright blue frosting. "You guys," I protested, embarrassed by the attention. "It wasn't that big a deal." "You donated an organ while working in healthcare during a pandemic," my supervisor countered. "If that's not hero material, I don't know what is." As I settled back into hospital routines, Marcus made good on his promise to explore involvement with Willow Wellness. He started small, volunteering to maintain the garden and handle basic administrative tasks that I had previously juggled alone. To my surprise, he had a natural rapport with the children, his easy charm and playful nature drawing out even the most withdrawn cancer survivors. "You're good with them," I observed one Saturday afternoon, watching him teach a 7-year-old boy how to build a bird feeder from recycled materials. "I wouldn't have expected that." "Kids don't care about your past mistakes," Marcus replied, handing the boy a container of birdseed. "They just care if you're present with them now." The wisdom in his observation struck me. Perhaps that was what we all needed, not to forget the past or pretend it hadn't happened, but to be fully present with each other now, allowing new experiences to gradually reshape our relationship. 3 months after the surgery, Marcus announced he had found an apartment in Portland and accepted a transfer to his company's Oregon office. The move marked a commitment to rebuilding not just our sibling relationship but his connection to our parents as well. "Are you sure about this?" I asked over coffee at our now regular weekend meetup. "Seattle was good for your career. Some things are more important than career advancement," he said simply. "Nearly dying has a way of clarifying priorities." His new apartment was a modest 1-bedroom in a neighborhood not far from mine, furnished sparsely but with surprising attention to detail. The bookshelves held volumes on pediatric psychology and nature-based therapy programs, evidence of his growing interest in the work at Willow Wellness. "I've been thinking about going back to school," he told me one evening as we unpacked kitchen supplies in his new place. "Maybe for counseling or social work. Something that would let me work with kids like the ones at the wellness center." The announcement would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. Marcus had always taken the path of least resistance, choosing careers based on salary potential rather than personal fulfillment. This new direction represented a fundamental shift in how he saw himself and his purpose. "That would be amazing," I said, genuinely excited by the possibility. "You have a gift with those kids. It shouldn't go to waste." "I had good teachers," he replied, glancing at me with a smile that acknowledged all that had changed between us. 6 months after the transplant, we celebrated with a small family dinner at my house, the first time our parents had been there for a social occasion since the inheritance dispute. Mom brought her famous lasagna, Dad opened a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider for toasting, and Marcus presented me with another charm for my bracelet, a tiny silver 6 to mark 6 months of successful transplant. "To new beginnings," Dad proposed, raising his glass. "And to the incredible strength of both my children." The simple acknowledgement that both of us had shown strength, not just Marcus in his illness or me in my donation, but both of us, in different ways, felt like the final piece of a complex puzzle falling into place. After a lifetime of feeling like the responsible but unremarkable sibling, I was finally being seen as strong in my own right. Later that evening, after our parents had gone home and Marcus was helping me load the dishwasher, he broached a subject we had danced around for months. "I want to talk about the house," he said, carefully placing wine glasses on the top rack. My body tensed automatically, prepared for the old argument to resurface despite all our progress. "What about it?" "I owe you an apology," he said, turning to face me directly. "Not just for how I reacted when Grandma left it to you, but for not understanding why she made that choice. This house was never meant to be just property to be divided or an asset to be liquidated. It was meant to be exactly what you've made it, a place of healing." The acknowledgement was more meaningful than I had expected, a recognition not just of my ownership but of my stewardship of Grandma Ellie's legacy. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means a lot." "There's more," Marcus continued. "I've been working on something, a proposal of sorts, and I wanted to run it by you before taking it any further." He retrieved his laptop from his bag and opened a document titled Willow Wellness Expansion Proposal. The detailed business plan outlined a significant growth strategy for the center, including expanded programming, dedicated staff positions, and a fundraising structure to support long-term sustainability. "This is incredible," I said, scrolling through the meticulously researched document. "How long have you been working on this?" "A few months," he admitted. "I've been talking to nonprofit consultants, researching similar programs around the country, even reaching out to potential donors to gauge interest." The level of thought and effort was touching, not just the practical support but the clear statement that he believed in what I had built and wanted to help it grow. "What role do you see for yourself in all this?" I asked, curious about his vision for his own involvement. "Whatever role you think is appropriate," he replied. "I've included a few options in the staffing section, everything from volunteer coordinator to program director, but ultimately, this is your creation. I'm just offering to help take it to the next level." The humility in his response, so different from the entitled attitude he had shown 3 years earlier, moved me deeply. This wasn't about claiming ownership or asserting control. It was about contributing his unique skills to something meaningful. "I think program director sounds perfect," I said after considering the options. "You have the business background I lack, and the kids already adore you." His face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Really? You'd trust me with that?" "Marcus," I said gently, "I trusted you with my kidney. I think I can trust you with program administration." 1 year after the transplant, Willow Wellness Center officially became a registered nonprofit organization with a small but dedicated staff, including Marcus as program director and me as medical director, a role I balanced with my continued work at the hospital. The detached garage had been professionally converted into a proper wellness studio, and the garden had expanded to include a vegetable patch where young cancer survivors learned about nutrition and sustainability. To mark the anniversary, we hosted an open house for families, medical professionals, and community supporters. The garden was decorated with paper lanterns, the newly renovated studio showcased art created by program participants, and a simple plaque was unveiled near the entrance, Willow Wellness Center, founded in memory of Olivia Reyes, who understood the healing power of home. As I watched Marcus leading tours through the garden, pointing out features with evident pride and introducing staff members with genuine respect, I marveled at how completely our relationship had transformed. The brother who had once declared, I wasn't family had become my closest ally, his former resentment replaced by mutual admiration and shared purpose. Mom appeared at my side, following my gaze to where Marcus was kneeling to speak with a young girl in a wheelchair, his manner attentive and gentle. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said, slipping her arm through mine. "Not just of what you've created here, but of what you and Marcus have become to each other." "I think she saw it before any of us did," I replied. "That's why she left the house to me alone, not to divide us, but because she knew eventually it would bring us back together." "Eleanor always did play the long game," Mom agreed with a soft laugh. But even she couldn't have predicted exactly how this would unfold. This encompassed so much: Marcus's illness, my donation, the transformation of both the property and our relationship. None of it could have been foreseen, yet somehow it felt like the fulfillment of something Grandma Ellie had set in motion with her final bequest. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the cleanup was complete, Marcus and I sat in Adirondack chairs in the garden, watching fireflies emerge in the summer twilight. He looked healthy and vibrant, his coloring normal, his energy levels higher than they had been even before the kidney failure. My kidney, our kidney now, was thriving inside him, quietly doing the work of filtering and cleansing without either of us having to think about it. "1 year," he mused, sipping sparkling water from a champagne flute. "It's hard to believe so much has changed in just 12 months. "Some things haven't changed," I pointed out. "You still leave wet towels on the bathroom floor and forget to refill the copier paper. And you still work too many hours and forget to eat lunch," he countered with a grin. "Good thing we balance each other out." The easy banter felt like a gift, the comfortable exchange of siblings who knew each other's flaws and loved each other anyway. We had found our way back to the connection of our childhood, but with a new dimension of mutual respect that had been missing before. "I've been thinking about Grandma a lot today," Marcus said, his expression growing more serious. "About what she might think of all this." "I think she'd be pleased," I replied. "The house is being used exactly as she hoped it would be." "Not just the house," Marcus shook his head. "Us. What we've become to each other. I think that mattered to her more than any property." "You might be right," I acknowledged. "Though I'm not sure she anticipated the whole kidney exchange thing." Marcus laughed, then grew thoughtful again. "You know, I used to think inheritance was about what you get. Now I understand it's really about what you give." The simple observation contained a profound truth. Grandma Ellie's most valuable legacy hadn't been the house itself but the capacity for giving that she had nurtured in me, the willingness to share not just physical space but my very self. And now that capacity was growing in Marcus too, manifesting in his dedication to Willow wellness and his genuine concern for the children we served. "I have something for you," I said, reaching into my pocket. "A sort of kidneyversary gift." I handed him a small box similar to the one he had given me 6 months earlier. Inside was a key on a silver chain, small enough to be worn as a necklace. "It's a key to the house," I explained as he lifted it from the box. "Not because you need one for practical reasons, you already have that. But as a symbol. This house is your inheritance too, Marcus. Not as property, but as purpose. What we're building here together, it belongs to both of us." His eyes filled with tears as he slipped the chain around his neck. "Thank you," he said simply. "For everything. The kidney, obviously, but even more for not giving up on me when you had every reason to." "That's what family does," I replied. "The real kind, not the Fairweather version." As darkness fell completely and the stars emerged overhead, we sat in comfortable silence, two people connected by blood, by shared history, and now by a shared organ that sustained one life while representing the generosity of another. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would surely be many in the continuing story of Willow Wellness and our reconfigured family, we would face them together, no longer divided by resentment or misunderstanding. 3 years earlier, Marcus had looked me in the eyes and said I wasn't family anymore. 1 year ago, he had called in desperate need of the most intimate form of help one person can give another. Today, we sat side by side, neither of us whole in the conventional sense, I with 1 kidney instead of 2, he with an organ not originally his own, yet somehow more complete than we had ever been before. The journey from estrangement to reconciliation had been complicated and painful, marked by medical crises and emotional reckonings. Yet sitting in Grandma Ellie's garden, our garden now, I wouldn't have changed any part of it, not even the 3 years of silence that had preceded Marcus's middle-of-the-night phone call. Each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to bring us to this place of genuine connection and shared purpose. As if reading my thoughts, Marcus spoke into the darkness. "Do you ever regret it? Giving me your kidney after how I treated you?" "Not for a second," I replied without hesitation. "Some gifts are given not because the recipient deserves them, but because giving is who the giver is." "And that's who you are," Marcus nodded. "A giver." It's who we both are now, I corrected gently. Different kinds of giving, maybe, but equally valuable. Marcus touched the key hanging around his neck, then reached across to tap the kidney bean charm on my bracelet. Different gifts, same family, he said simply. As a shooting star traced a brief, brilliant path across the night sky, I made a silent promise to Grandma Ellie. The legacy she had entrusted to me would continue to grow and evolve, not just through the physical space of the house but through the healing work we were doing there and the renewed bonds of family she had somehow foreseen even when they seemed irrevocably broken. Some inheritances, I had learned, aren't measured in property or possessions but in possibilities, the possibility of forgiveness, of transformation, of finding strength you never knew you had. And some gifts, once given, continue giving in ways that ripple outward beyond anything the giver could have imagined. My kidney, now Marcus's kidney, was just such a gift, not merely an organ enabling physical survival but a bridge connecting two people who had lost their way back to each other. In sharing a piece of myself, I had received something far more valuable in return, a brother who finally saw me, a family made whole again, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the most healing gift is simply the willingness to begin again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.